The day I found out Jason stole my inheritance, I was sitting in Dad's lawyer's office, expecting nothing but a formality. The lawyer looked me in the eyes, hesitating, and then said, "Your father left everything to your brother." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud because I thought it was a joke. Jason? The same Jason who missed Dad's final hospital visit? The same Jason who didn't even speak at the funeral? It had to be a mistake. But when the lawyer slid the papers across the table, my whole body went cold. No mention of me. Not a single line. Just Jason. The golden boy. I remember my hands trembling as I said, "My dad would never do this. Never." And that's when I knew something was terribly wrong. He didn't just steal money. He stole my father's legacy. Have you ever been betrayed by the one person who is supposed to protect you? If you have, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Because this story isn't just mine. It could be yours too. Some people say blood is thicker than water. But I've learned the hard way sometimes it just stains deeper. My brother Jason and I grew up in Cedar Springs, Michigan. It was a small town where everybody knew everybody and secrets were hard to keep. We lived in a modest white clapboard house with green shutters and a creaky porch swing Dad built himself. Jason was 3 years older than me and the very definition of the golden child. Blonde hair, green eyes, a smirk that charmed teachers and a temper that scared off bullies. Everyone loved Jason. I mean, everyone. Teachers, neighbors, even the cranky grocery store clerk who never smiled at anyone. And I was the quiet one, the one with scabby knees and crooked bangs. I followed Jason everywhere like a shadow. He'd climb trees, I'd follow. He'd race his bike down the hill, I'd be right behind him, even if I scraped both elbows on the way. But Jason never let anyone else pick on me. Never. He once punched a boy in 3rd grade for calling me chubby. We both got detention, and he smiled the whole time. After our mom passed away from a sudden brain aneurysm, things changed. I was 5. Jason was 8. And just like that, our little family of 4 became 3. Dad, God bless that man, he didn't crumble. He didn't drink or disappear like some widowers do. He showed up. He packed our lunches, braided my hair terribly every morning, and worked double shifts as a history teacher and weekend handyman just to keep the lights on. He also made us feel safe. No matter how tired he was, he never missed our bedtime stories. He'd lie between us in that big old bed and read from the same tattered book every night. The little engine that could. And I believed we could. All of us. Together. Jason and I had our sibling fights, sure. Fights over chores, over who got the last Pop-Tart, over TV remotes. But when it came down to it, we were solid. There was this summer when I was 10 and Jason was 13. Dad built a treehouse in our backyard from scraps of lumber and leftover paint. He called it the Sky Nest. Jason added a cardboard sign that said, "No adults allowed, except Dad." We'd stay up there until sunset, eating melted peanut butter cups and talking about the future. Jason wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be a writer. He said, "One day, I'll fly us anywhere we want. You write the stories, I'll fly the plane." I still remember that like it was yesterday. Like the summer air still smells of hope and sap and childhood dreams. But time doesn't freeze. It marches forward, even when you're not ready. Jason started pulling away around age 16. He became moodier, harder to reach. He'd come home late smelling like beer and cheap cologne. I'd wait by the window some nights, praying he didn't get caught, or worse, crash Dad's car. Dad tried. He grounded him, lectured him, cried once, a quiet cry behind closed doors I wasn't supposed to hear. But Jason wouldn't budge. I used to think it was just a phase, that he'd return to us, to who he was. He went off to college in Arizona. Didn't even look back in the rearview mirror when Dad waved goodbye. I remember holding Dad's hand that day. His knuckles were white, but his lips still whispered, "That's my boy. He just needs time." I stayed. Went to Grand Rapids Community College, so I could be nearby. I cooked, cleaned, helped Dad when his knees began aching every time it rained. We'd watch old war movies together and complain about Jason not calling. And when Jason did call, it was never for long.
Quick. Dry.
Always ending with something like, "Hey, you think Dad's planning to sell the house? Did Dad ever tell you about what's in the will? Just curious. I've got some financial stuff happening." I ignored it. I wanted to ignore it. Because the alternative? That he only saw Dad as a transaction. That would have broken me. Then one winter, Dad collapsed in the kitchen. I found him on the floor, clutching his chest with blue lips. I called 911, shaking, sobbing, slipping on spilled tea while trying to hold his hand. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and heartbreak. Doctors ran tests,
Scans.
blood work, diagnosis, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Terminal. Maybe 6 months. Probably less. I called Jason that night from the hospital parking lot. The cold bit through my coat. My teeth were chattering, but my voice shook for different reasons. He answered on the second ring. "It's bad, Jason," I whispered. "They said it's advanced. Fast-moving." There was a long pause. Then he said, "Did he ever finish the will?" "Not." "How is he?" "Not." "Are you okay?" "Not." "Should I fly in?" Just that one sentence, sharp like a knife. Did he ever finish the will? I felt the breath leave my lungs. My throat went dry. "Jason, are you serious?" He exhaled. "I'm just saying, we need to be prepared."
Prepared?
For what? His death, or your payday? I didn't say that out loud. Instead, I bit my tongue and said something like, "We'll figure it out. Later." From that moment, something between us cracked permanently. Jason visited once during Dad's final months. He brought a bouquet of wilted flowers and stayed for less than 30 minutes. He told Dad he was working on a big crypto deal and had to get back to LA. Dad smiled anyway. He still called him champ. Still told me, he's just got a lot on his plate. But I saw the sadness in his eyes as Jason walked out of that room. And I hated myself for not screaming, for not making him stay. I held Dad's hand through everything, through the vomiting, the confusion, the pain. He withered down to bones. And one cold morning in March, he was gone. The funeral was simple, just like he wanted. Jason gave a big speech about legacy, and people cried. He looked the part, suited, stoic. Even I almost believed it. Until a week later, I sat in Dad's lawyer's office, expecting a copy of the will, maybe some closure. Instead, I got a dagger to the heart. The lawyer cleared his throat and said, "Your father left the house, the savings, and all listed assets to your brother Jason." I blinked. "Excuse me?" He slid the document forward. "This is the signed version." I read it. Again.
And again.
No mention of me. Not even a sentence. Not even my name. It was like I had been erased. I whispered, "There must be a mistake. My dad would never." I was with him every single day. The lawyer shook his head gently. "This is the version we were given." Jason. Jason had been alone with Dad during that one short visit. Jason had brought papers. Jason had called, asking questions. Jason had always been in a rush, but this wasn't just negligence. This was a setup. And in that moment, I knew he hadn't just abandoned us. He had stolen from me, from him, from the man who raised us both with love and honesty and legacy. Jason didn't just steal money. He stole my father's dying wish. And I wasn't about to let him get away with it. They say hindsight is 20/20ths. And looking back now, all the signs were there. But I didn't want to see them. Not when it was Jason. Not when it was the brother I worshipped. After that phone call in the parking lot, the one where he asked about Dad's will instead of Dad's life, something inside me shifted. I remember driving home from the hospital that night and gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I kept replaying his tone. Cool, detached, like we were discussing tax forms instead of our father's death sentence. But I brushed it off. I had to. I told myself he was just in shock. Maybe his way of processing grief was different. Colder. Still, the little things kept stacking up. The next week, Jason wired $300 into Dad's account and texted me. Use this for meds. I'll help when I can. It wasn't the money, it was the tone. Like it was charity. Like he was doing us a favor. And when I replied, thanks, that means a lot, he didn't even answer. A few days later, I got a call from a real estate agent, someone named Diane from Grand Traverse Properties. She said, "Hi, is this Sarah? We got a call from your brother Jason about potentially listing the house. He mentioned you'd be coordinating access?" I nearly dropped the phone. Listing the house. I repeated.
No.
No, absolutely not. Our father is still alive.
She paused. Oh, I'm sorry.
He didn't mention that. I hung up shaking. When I called Jason, he sounded irritated. I was just checking our options. Don't overreact. Overreact. I snapped. You tried to sell Dad's house before he's even. He cut me off. Relax. It's not like I signed anything. Jesus, Sarah. Always so dramatic. I should have screamed. I should have told Dad. I should have done something. But instead, I hung up, locked the doors that night, and cried. I started noticing other things too. Jason had somehow gotten access to Dad's online banking. I'd log in and see random balance checks, money moved between accounts. Nothing major, just little nudges. When I confronted Dad gently, he just smiled weakly. Jason's trying to help. He says he's got a good handle on finance. That word again, trying. Dad used it like a shield. Jason's trying. Jason means well. Jason's got a lot on his plate. Meanwhile, I was burning myself out being nurse, accountant, maid, and emotional anchor, and Jason was showing up every few weeks in fancy shoes, talking about leveraging assets. He never once helped me change the bedsheets. Never once washed Dad's clothes when they were soaked in sweat and meds. Never once stayed overnight to watch his nightmares unfold in real time. But he always asked about paperwork. One day, I found Jason going through Dad's filing cabinet in the middle of the afternoon. I had just come back from the pharmacy. He didn't hear me walk in. "What are you doing?" I asked. He jumped. "Nothing. Just checking tax stuff. Dad asked me to." I looked at him, at the way he subtly slipped a file back in, out of place. "Which taxes?" I pressed. He shrugged. "Jesus, Sarah.
Chill.
You're acting paranoid." He left 15 minutes later, without saying goodbye to Dad. He texted me that night. "Maybe take a break. You're sounding unstable." Unstable. Because I was noticing things. Because I wasn't pretending anymore. Dad never saw any of it. Or maybe he didn't want to. To him, Jason was always the son who'd return. The one who'd just lost his way. And me? I was the constant, always present, always dependable. The daughter who didn't need declarations or praise. But I did need fairness. I needed my father to see what I was seeing. I needed to believe I wasn't crazy. One night, it was mid-January, snow outside piled like white silence. I overheard Dad on the phone with Jason.
He was frail now.
Speaking in low murmurs from his bed. "If you're sure, son, if you really think it's the best way to protect things, then okay. Just bring the forms next time." I froze outside his door. My heart dropped. Forms? When Jason arrived 3 days later with a leather folder and a professional smile, I didn't say a word. He stayed in the room with Dad for over an hour. I wasn't invited in. After he left, I checked the trash. Nothing. Checked Dad's nightstand. Just crossword puzzles and an old photo of Mom. I couldn't prove anything. But I felt it. Felt the cold metal taste of betrayal on my tongue. Then Jason posted something online. A smug, now deleted Instagram story of him in front of a building downtown with the caption, "Next big move coming. #trust the process." The building was a real estate office. I showed it to my cousin Melissa. She frowned and said, "Sarah, something's not right. You need to be careful." But what could I do? Dad trusted him. Legally, Jason was still family. And, emotionally, I still couldn't believe my brother, the boy from the sky nest, the one who carved our names into tree bark, would do something unforgivable. I was in denial, even as the pieces fell together. even as my gut screamed louder every day. I told myself, maybe I'm just exhausted. Maybe I'm making this bigger than it is. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just neglect. It was a plan, a slow, quiet betrayal, carefully disguised as helping out. And I was watching it unfold like a silent horror movie, unable to scream. The morning my father died was too quiet. It was March 6th, still cold enough for frost on the windows. I had fallen asleep in the chair beside his bed, my neck stiff, my hand still wrapped loosely around his. When I opened my eyes, I knew before I even moved. He was still, too still, and I didn't hear his breathing anymore. His mouth was slightly open, eyes half shut, like he had been dreaming of somewhere peaceful and decided to stay. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring, holding onto a hand that was no longer warm, whispering, "It's okay, Dad. You can rest now. I'm here." I called hospice, then the funeral home, then Jason. He didn't answer the first call, or the second. I texted him.
He's gone.
Call me. He replied 2 hours later. Can you handle everything until I fly in? Not, I'm so sorry. Not, are you okay? Just delegation. That entire week, I moved like a ghost through a checklist. Obituary, cremation forms, floral arrangements. I signed documents I couldn't see through my tears. I picked out a suit for the viewing, his favorite navy blue blazer that still smelled like Old Spice. Jason flew in the day before the service. He brought some woman with him. I think her name was Alina, who introduced herself as his consultant.
Consultant?
For what grief? Jason wore a fitted black suit, smiled at people, gave hugs like he was a politician. And during the eulogy, he said all the right things. My father was a man of principle. He taught me how to stand tall in hard times. He believed in family above all. And I sat there thinking, how dare you? Because when the machines beeped low at 3:47 a.m., it wasn't your name, he whispered. It was mine. Sarah, he said, barely audible. You stayed. Not, I love you. Not, goodbye. Just you stayed. And that was enough. It said everything. After the service, while guests hugged and murmured condolences, Jason pulled me aside near the parking lot. So listen, he said. We should probably go over the documents this week. Dad finalized everything. I blinked. What documents? He looked surprised. Didn't the lawyer call you yet? I shook my head. What are you talking about? Jason gave me that smirk, the one I'd seen 100 times growing up. The smug, I'm ahead of you smirk. Dad changed the will before he passed. I'm the primary beneficiary. I've already scheduled a meeting with the estate attorney. I felt something in my stomach twist, like falling from a great height with no landing in sight. Why would he do that? I asked, my voice dry. We talked about everything. He never said. Jason interrupted. He didn't want to burden you. He knew I had experience handling assets. Jason, he left me nothing? I whispered. He gave a half shrug. Technically, no. But that doesn't mean I won't help. I'm not a monster, Sarah. But that's exactly what it felt like. Like I was standing across from someone I no longer recognized. The next morning, I went to the lawyer's office by myself. Mr. Daniels, a kind, aging man who had been my father's legal advisor for years, looked visibly uncomfortable. Your brother brought in updated documents, he explained. Dated 6 weeks before your father's passing. He handed me a copy of the will. I scanned every line, my fingers trembling. The house, the retirement accounts, the life insurance. All of it, every single thing, went to Jason. There wasn't even a mention of me. Not a note. Not a trust. Not even a family heirloom. This isn't right, I said. My father would never do this. Mr. Daniels looked down at his desk. Sarah, I reviewed your father's signature myself. The document was witnessed, notarized, and legally binding. I stood up so fast the chair scraped across the floor. Jason made him sign that. He pressured him. He must have brought those papers and convinced him when he was weak. Daniels cut in gently. I'm not saying you're wrong, But without proof, the court won't challenge it.
Proof.
How do you prove manipulation? How do you prove guilt when it's wrapped in a suit and a smile? I walked out of that office with the weight of the world pressing down on my chest. That night, I went into Dad's room, what used to be his room, and opened every drawer. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Maybe a note. Maybe a backup will. Maybe just something that said, I saw you. I loved you. I didn't forget you. In the bottom drawer, under an old sweater, I found a sealed envelope. My name written in his handwriting. Inside was a letter. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say goodbye the way I wanted. You were the light of my life. You gave me peace in my final days. I know this world isn't always fair, and I regret that some choices were made in weakness. I hope one day you'll understand. I trust your heart to do what's right. There was no mention of Jason. No explanation. But the part that broke me was, you gave me peace. That night, I sat on the floor of my father's room and cried until my body ached. Not just because I'd lost him, but because he had left without protecting me. Jason had won. He had everything. And I had a letter. A letter. And a fire building in my chest I could no longer ignore. This wasn't just grief anymore. It was war. The funny thing about betrayal is, it doesn't kill you all at once. It bleeds you slowly, quietly, one moment at a time, until you're standing in a room full of memories, holding a letter that feels like both a gift and a goodbye you didn't deserve. I carried that letter in my coat pocket for 3 days. Read it every night like a prayer. Each word from my father's handwriting was a lifeline. A whisper from beyond saying, you mattered. Even if no one else sees it, I did. But that wasn't enough. Not anymore. Jason had taken everything, the house, the accounts, the dignity of our father's final wishes, and dressed it up like it was business. But it wasn't business. It was theft. It was betrayal. It was cruelty wrapped in suits and smooth smiles and fake grief. So, I decided to confront him.
Properly. Publicly.
The opportunity came at Dad's memorial gathering at the town hall, a second service for extended family and community friends who couldn't make the funeral. Jason planned the whole thing like a corporate event, caterers, a microphone, printed programs with his face on the back page as lead organizer. I showed up in a simple black dress. No makeup. Just a folder in one hand and the letter in the other. I remember walking through those double doors. The room went quiet for a second. People turned. Jason saw me from across the room and smiled. That fake, polished smile he wore like a badge of invincibility. Sarah, he said, walking over. Glad you could make it. You okay? I will be, I said. Eventually. He didn't catch the edge in my tone. Or maybe he did, but thought he was untouchable. Big mistake. Halfway through the gathering, Jason took the mic. Thank you all for coming, he said, voice smooth. Dad would be so proud of this turnout. He believed in family, in legacy, in building something lasting. Legacy. That word burned in my throat like acid. When he finished, people clapped politely. I stood up, walked right to the front, and asked for the mic. Jason looked confused. A flicker of something crossed his face. Surprise? Fear? I didn't care. I won't take long, I told the crowd. But there's something I need to say. The room fell silent. Some of you knew my father as a teacher. Some as a neighbor. Some as a friend. But I knew him as the man who raised me, who held my hand when my mother died, who worked 2 jobs so Jason and I could eat, who never missed a bedtime story even when his bones ached. My voice cracked. I steadied myself. He wasn't just a man of principle. He was a man who believed in fairness, in family, and in truth. I looked right at Jason, which is why it breaks my heart to stand here and tell you that his final wishes were manipulated, changed under pressure, exploited when he was too weak to fight back.
Gasps.
Murmurs. Jason stood up. Sarah, what are you doing? Telling the truth, I said, louder now. Because I won't let you rewrite our father's story just to make yourself look good. I opened the folder. held up a copy of the original will, the one drafted months before his health declined. Dad had left the house to both of us. The accounts split. A balanced, thoughtful document. This, I said, was his intention. But somehow, 6 weeks before his death, when he could barely hold a spoon, a new version appeared. One that left me with nothing. The room went still. Jason's face was pale. He stammered. That's not true. He made the decision himself. He wanted me to manage things. Funny, I said, because he also left me this. I pulled out the letter. You gave me peace, I read aloud. I regret that some choices were made in weakness. People were listening now. Really listening. My father may have been too sick to fight, I said, voice trembling, but I'm not. I'm not afraid of you, Jason. And I'm not letting you pretend to be the son he was proud of while erasing the daughter who was there every single day. Jason stepped forward. This is emotional manipulation. She's trying to stir drama. Oh, you want to talk about manipulation? I snapped. You brought contracts into a hospice room. You asked about money while he was dying. You called realtors while I was cleaning vomit off his sheets. His jaw clenched. You don't have proof. I have witnesses, I said. And I've already started the legal process to contest the will. He froze. Wait, you're taking this to court? Damn right I am, I said. And I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it because he deserved better. Because I deserve better. I turned to the crowd. If you ever loved my father, if you believed in who he was, then don't let silence bury the truth. No one clapped. No one spoke, but a few nodded, and one older woman in the back whispered, loud enough for me to hear. I always wondered how that boy turned out so different from his father. Jason walked out 5 minutes later. Didn't say another word to me. That night, I filed the official petition to contest the will. The case would take months. Jason would fight. He'd try to discredit me, intimidate me, wear me down. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Because I had already done the hardest thing. I stood up, in front of everyone, and I told the truth. And sometimes, that's the most powerful kind of justice there is. After the confrontation, the silence was louder than anything I'd ever heard.
People didn't know what to say.
Some avoided me. Others texted vague things like, thinking of you. But most just disappeared. Turns out, the truth has a way of making people uncomfortable, especially when it shatters the image they've held onto for years. Jason didn't respond to my petition. At first. Then came the emails. Long-winded explanations. Accusations of emotional instability. Even threats, wrapped in legal language like, dragging the family name through court is not what Dad would have wanted. He tried calling, too. I stopped answering. Instead, I focused on what I could control. I hired a lawyer, someone from Grand Rapids who specialized in estate disputes. A woman named Cynthia. She was calm, precise, and didn't flinch when I handed her the folder of evidence. He took advantage of diminished capacity, I told her. He made Dad sign that new will when he couldn't even remember what day it was. Cynthia nodded. I've seen this before. It won't be easy, but you have a case. Still, nothing prepared me for what came next. Jason's team dug deep. They pulled every text I'd ever sent Dad. Tried to paint me as controlling, resentful, overly emotional. They even subpoenaed my therapy records from when I was 17. I sat in depositions for hours. Lawyers asking questions designed to trip me up. Did your father ever verbally confirm you were included in his will? Can you prove he didn't want to leave everything to Jason? Is it possible you're misremembering due to grief? And through it all, I kept hearing Dad's voice in my head. You stayed. I clung to that. Meanwhile, the house, our house, sat empty.
Cold. Silent.
The porch swing creaked in the wind. Dust gathered on the photo frames inside. I visited sometimes just to sit on the front steps, to remember what it felt like to belong to something. Melissa, my cousin, brought me casseroles and court updates. She was one of the few who stayed. Others faded. Aunt Shirley, who used to call me Sweet Pea, sent me a long Facebook message saying she couldn't take sides. Uncle Ray blocked me. Even my godmother texted, "Maybe it's time to let it go, sweetheart." But how do you let go of being erased? How do you make peace with being made invisible by the very people who raised you? I started having dreams. Nightmares, really. Jason in Dad's hospital room, signing papers, whispering things I couldn't hear. And me, banging on the glass outside, screaming for someone to stop him. I'd wake up drenched in sweat. Sometimes I'd call Cynthia just to hear a calm voice. "This isn't just about money," I said one day. "This is about who gets to tell the story, who gets remembered." She understood. But the court didn't move fast.
It dragged.
Depositions, paperwork, hearing delays. Meanwhile, Jason posted pictures of weekend getaways, cocktail bars, and investment updates. He bought a condo in Chicago. He even listed Dad's house. Put it on the market like it was just another brick-and-mortar flip project. That broke me more than anything. I drove there the night I found out. Parked in the driveway. Cried so hard I couldn't breathe. The curtains were different. The porch swing had been taken down. It was like someone had ripped pages out of my life and written new ones over the gaps. But in all that grief, something else began to rise. A kind of clarity. Not anger. Not even revenge. Just knowing. Knowing I did what was right. Knowing I told the truth, even when no one clapped. Even when the silence echoed louder than applause. One morning, I opened a box of Dad's old things Melissa had saved for me. Inside was a small notebook.
Tattered. Handwritten.
Sarah's notes, it said on the front. It was a collection of stories I'd written as a kid, about pirates and magical forests and a talking cat named Winston. And inside the cover, Dad had written, "To my storyteller, the one who always saw more than the surface. Keep writing, baby girl. The world needs your voice." I held that notebook and sobbed for what felt like hours. Because that was it. That was the real inheritance. Not the house. Not the accounts. Not the insurance. But the belief that I mattered. That my story mattered. And that I had every right to tell it. The court finally set a hearing date, September 19th. Jason's lawyer offered a settlement, a quiet payout in exchange for me dropping the petition. I said no. Not because I wanted a courtroom drama, but because I wanted the truth on record. If I was going to lose, I wanted to lose loudly. I wanted someone, even a judge, to hear me say, "I was there. I held his hand. I honored his life. And I will not be erased by someone who treated him like a business transaction." The night before the hearing, I went back to the treehouse. The sky nest.
It was weather-worn now.
The wood warped. One corner of the roof collapsed. But the carved initials were still there. J+S, inside a crooked heart. I stared at them for a long time. And then, with shaking hands, I took out a small pocket knife and carved a new line underneath. I stayed. Healing doesn't come all at once. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or applause. It's quieter than you think. It slips in between the sobs and sleepless nights. It creeps up in moments you didn't expect, like when I finally slept a full night without dreaming of courtrooms or hospital rooms. The hearing came and went. The judge ruled that there was reasonable cause to believe the will was signed under duress. She ordered a full review of the estate and paused the sale of the house. Jason didn't speak to me after that. Didn't even look at me as he stormed out of the courthouse. And for the first time, I felt nothing. No fire. No anger. Just silence, but not the heavy kind. The kind that felt like space. Like breathing room. I went home that night and opened a new document on my laptop. Titled it, "The Things They Took." It was supposed to be an article,
but it turned into a story.
Then a manuscript. Then a book. A small publisher picked it up 5 months later. They said, "This is exactly the kind of emotional truth readers crave right now." It wasn't the bestseller, but it reached people. Women messaged me with their own stories. My brother did something similar after Mom died. "Thank you for saying what I've been too afraid to say. You made me feel seen." And that's when I realized Telling my story wasn't just about justice. It was about connection. In the months that followed, I slowly began rebuilding. I started going to a grief support group in town every Tuesday evening. At first, I just listened. Then one day, a woman named Linda said something about her brother manipulating their mom's medical care. I raised my hand and said, "I know exactly what that feels like." After the session, she hugged me so hard, I almost cried again. I also started therapy again, not for trauma this time, but for clarity. My therapist, Dr. Myers, asked me during one session, "What would justice look like if it didn't come through a courtroom?" I thought for a moment. "It would look like me not hiding anymore," I said. "It would look like freedom." So I made small promises to myself. To walk every morning, even when I didn't feel like it. To call Melissa just to talk, not just when things were falling apart.
To say no when I needed rest.
To laugh without guilt. It wasn't easy. Sometimes I still cried over a song on the radio. Sometimes I still wanted to scream at the empty air for all that had been stolen. But I was learning that healing wasn't forgetting. It was remembering differently. One day, while organizing some of Dad's old books, I found a receipt tucked inside a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. It was dated 5 years before his death. He had bought 2 copies. Mine was the second one. I remembered that day. He had come home, handed it to me, and said, "You're gonna love this one. It's about standing up when everyone else stays quiet." Now I understood. He had been teaching me all along. The house stayed in legal limbo for a while. Eventually, Jason backed off. He signed a settlement agreement that gave me the home, not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't fight the public scrutiny any longer. I didn't sell it. I turned it into something else. A community space. I called it the Sky Nest, after our old treehouse. It became a quiet center for grief groups, writing workshops, and estate planning seminars. People came with heavy stories, and they left lighter. And in that space, I found pieces of my father again. His bookshelf, his favorite lamp, even the old swing, restored and hanging from the back porch. Children laughed on it now. Laughed in a house where I once cried alone. And that laughter? It felt like a kind of justice, too. Melissa helped run the center. We painted walls, hung wind chimes, planted flowers in the shape of a heart. And one day she said, "You know, if your dad could see this, he'd be proud." I smiled. "He can see this," I whispered, because I felt him. In the quiet, in the wind that moved the chimes. In the letters people wrote and slipped into the memory box at the door. I no longer needed a verdict to know I had done the right thing. I had rebuilt something with the very bricks Jason tried to bury me under. And in that, I found peace. Not perfect peace, but enough. If you've made it this far, thank you. You didn't just listen to my story. You held space for it. And that means more than you could ever know. Because silence, not betrayal, was the hardest part of all this. The silence of rooms that once echoed with laughter. The silence after I spoke the truth, and people looked away. The silence from those I thought would defend me but didn't. Maybe you know that silence too. Maybe you've sat in the middle of your own storm, heart cracked wide open, waiting for someone to say, "I believe you." So, let me be that voice for you right now. I believe you. I believe your grief. I believe your instincts. I believe your story deserves to be told. Whether someone took what was yours, or made you feel invisible in your own family, or turned your pain into paperwork, please hear me when I say, you are not alone. The truth has a pulse. Even when buried, even when silenced, it beats. And sometimes, all it takes is one voice. Tired, trembling, but true, to bring it back to life. If you've ever felt erased by your own blood, if you've ever had to choose between peace and truth,